Hi everyone. Let's get started. This is chapter 4. I'm going to do each video for each chapter because I'm having issues with Collaborate and I don't want to invest the entire hour and a half and then find out it didn't work. So here we go. We're going to try out chapter 4 first, and hopefully this will take maybe 20-25 minutes at the most. All right, so let's get into chapter 4. And chapter 4 is all about emotions. And so we're going to start off with this cute little video clip. So I hope you enjoyed that. And it's just to kick off here our topic of emotions. So we're going to be spending chapter 4 on the various aspects of emotions, defining it as feelings that are expressed and that have several characteristics, both psychological and things that happen internally to us, which could also include physiological changes as well as behavioral expressions. And so these could be psychologically, they could be internal sensations that you're feeling, such as you get anxious and therefore you have an increased heartbeat, or you start breathing rapidly, you feel the adrenaline rush come over you. And that is not just psychological, but also physiological. As far as how you express this behaviorally, it could be that somebody sees you shaking, sweating, maybe crying, maybe kicking, maybe laughing, blushing, etc. So those are the various aspects of emotions. And then they also have the side where It is what you're interpreting it as inside. So cognitively, what is your interpretation? So all emotions have to be cognitively appraised because we are feeling sensations physiologically, and we have to put a label to them. We have to put a cognitive label to them. So for example, if you are on a roller coaster and your heart is pounding and you're breathing heavy, then you are cognitively connecting that to the fact that it must be because you're on the roller coaster and not because you're having a heart attack or because you're in love. And it's interesting that sometimes if you go on a first date with somebody on a roller coaster, they'll actually misinterpret those signals that they normally would interpret as I'm just excited about the roller coaster, and they'll actually misattribute them onto you, your first date. So yeah, so there's a tip for dating, right? As far as motivational tendencies, that looks at how maybe through your emotions you are directed towards certain things that you find fulfilling and that you find satisfying, or you're directed away from things that you feel are anxiety arousing or that are just painful, and therefore you avoid those situations. Moods are another key term in this chapter. And sometimes, I'm sorry, we're yawning here. Sometimes we combine moods with emotions as far as like not being able to distinguish them. So your book is getting here into the semantics of saying, hey, it's a general feeling, a tone that influences your emotions, but that's how they're separating it from emotions. So back to the definition of emotions, emotions are those feelings that you actually experience. And so that was their difference in the definition between emotions and mood. As far as the types of emotions, we have the primary emotions, which there is a wheel in your book, and the researcher Plitkick identified 8 primary emotions: joy, acceptance, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. And then you can have any variety of those combinations. And so those primary emotions can also combine to make mixed emotions, such as love, disappointment, contempt, optimism, etc. When you have intense emotions, those can be good or bad. Your book here gave the example that it can lead to negative effects, but you could also have intense passions that get you going and really drive you and maybe cause you to enter a state of flow where you lose track of time because you're just so involved in what you're doing. So not all intense emotions are negative, but the problem ones, and when those start interfering with your daily functioning, that can be problematic. So here's where we're talking about, well, when does fear become problematic? When does anxiety become problematic, or anger? I mean, it's okay to have these sensations, it's okay to have these emotions, but are you having them so frequently that they're interfering with your daily functioning? Are they, causing you to avoid certain things? Are they changing what you used to be able to do as far as going to school, going to work, having a relationship? Maybe because of your anxiety, you're not able to do some of those things. As far as the slide in your chapter for facing your fears and anxieties, I think these are good tips, but of course, they're going to depend on a lot of things. Like, for example, if you have fear and anxiety that's so severe that it is keeping you from going to work, then these are just, they're just lip service, but they're not really going to do much unless you seek out some kind of professional help for that possible clinical level of anxiety. Now, one of the things I always tell my students is don't diagnose yourself, right? So that's the worst thing you could do is diagnose yourselves, because you have access to all this information, but it does take a professional and, a psychologist, a counselor, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, for diagnosing. You want this to get in the right hands. You don't want to just get out there, because I mean the internet is full of information, guys, and next thing you know, you have everything. So be careful about diagnosing yourself. But if you feel that your anxiety level is interfering with your daily functioning, then you definitely want to maybe seek out some help. And so that's where, calling on a counselor, even at school, we have counselors at EPCC. You have, if you have insurance, you have access to mental health services. If you don't have insurance, we have various resources throughout the community that can assist you with mental health. So reaching out, and taking action on some of those problem emotions is definitely recommended. But if it's not so severe and you have some anxieties that maybe you consider pretty normal, everybody's got a little bit of things that they're worried about or that they're scared of, then these tips might be great. So, like admitting your fears, taking risk, acknowledge the good things, because we're wired, unfortunately, to kind of look at the bad and focus too much on the bad. And so avoiding, just focusing on the negative and making an effort. It actually takes an effort to focus on the good. As far as catastrophic thinking, if you tend to be somebody who's catastrophic, that's, you're waiting for someone and they're running late, and next thing you're thinking, oh my God, they've had an accident, they're in the hospital, and you start calling hospitals. That is catastrophic thinking. And so it is good to avoid that kind of thinking, because it definitely can have you in a whirlwind of stress all the time. Staying in the present, as opposed to living in the past, which you cannot do anything about, or worrying about the future, which is also, kind of out of our hands. I mean, we can make some preparations, but we never know exactly what's coming in the future. And so staying in the present, I like that tip. And then, of course, having patience, right? Okay, having patience for yourself, for you to grow, having patience for the people around you that possibly cause you some anxiety as well. Another problem emotion that was listed is anger. And anger control is very important to you and to your success in your relationships, in your jobs, in your classes. So you definitely want to learn how to control your anger. And if you have anger issues and you feel that they might be so severe that they do keep you from functioning, then again, I'm going to say you should reach out for some assistance. There are some do's and don'ts. So, knowing as far as your anger, are you able to control it? Because sometimes people will speak up, but they're going to let themselves just get so elevated that things are going to get out of hand. And if you know you have a tendency to do that, or maybe you know that it's an issue that's really important to you, and that you're very passionate about, and that maybe you're going to just get a hold of it and let it go wherever it ends you, wherever it takes you. And so that's problematic too. So be careful with speaking up, if you know that you might not be able to control your emotions. But take time out, to think about what the issue at hand and what your position is. And, speak, always advise to speak in I language, not you. So when you tell people you did this, you are this, like you are so lazy, or you are so abusive, or you are so manipulative, and you say those kinds of things, it puts people on the defensive. So be careful with using you language, and instead resort to I language and catch yourself, right? Okay. And try to speak in the I. What I would do, this is what I feel when you do this. This is what I feel. This is what I perceive. So careful with making accusations with you language. As far as guilt can be another problematic emotion. And that one, we're given various tips for guilt, but guilt can come for different reasons. You can have guilt for something possibly that you did now as an adult and that you feel guilty of on your own, or you could have guilt because you have people in your life who makes you feel guilty. Maybe those people pour on the guilt trip. Maybe there's somebody who likes to make you wallow in your misery and keeps rubbing it in your face, and that can definitely bring on some guilt when you've made a mistake. And then, of course, we have that guilt that comes from how we were raised. And sometimes the way our parents raised us might have led us to always feel responsible for things and that it's everything's our fault. And, so those aren't good things either. And so, kind of spending some time on why you think you might feel guilty. And if you feel guilty for everything, then something's wrong. If you feel guilty for something you did and it was a mistake, then that's absolutely correct. And that's an appropriate use of guilt. But it's important for you to find out exactly why you feel guilty, right? Okay, should you be feeling guilty for this or not? And then, coming back and reappraising the rules. So like somebody might make you feel guilty for something that they actually were responsible for. And, sitting back and saying, when they said that I made them angry or that I did this to them, I mean, you can't make other people angry. They allow themselves to get angry. So, reappraising like what rules have been applied to you and can you change them? Can you reset? Can you reappraise so that you are seeing a better, fair approach is what you want to be able to do. You don't want to take the hit for everything that's not fair, right? Because you're not responsible for everything. You do want to be responsible for the mistakes that you've personally made. And so, starting to also assess like what is right or wrong, because sometimes we grow up with people who are very obsessive and very particular about certain things, and they make you feel guilty about stuff that, it's not going to change the world, if you didn't make your bed exactly the right way, or if you, left the dishes in the sink overnight. I mean, but some of us are made to feel guilty for things that are actually quite trivial. So starting to also evaluate, like, am I maybe taking on this morality of someone that was handed down to me and it's not even accurate, right? Okay, so learning how to make your own decisions, make your own analysis of what is right and what is wrong, and learning also how to forgive yourself. That one's just so easy to say and so hard to do, but I'm going to keep emphasizing that one throughout our session today. And then finally, recognizing also here when it comes to guilt that you cannot be perfect. Nobody is perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. And you accept the mistake, you fess up to it, and you also, another thing about like saying sorry, because people will say sorry, I'm sorry I did that, but you also want to take action so you don't keep repeating the same thing, because it's one thing just to kind of say sorry and give lip service and then just go right back to doing it again. And so then you're going to be walking around in guilt that you continue to bring on for yourself, so you don't want to do that either. Another problem emotion that can be very problematic is grief and bereavement. And, if you've lost a loved one, you can definitely relate to the process of grief. And, grief can become problematic. Initially, it's not pleasant as we are grieving someone, but there is a line between normal grieving process and that which has exceeded that. And so looking at, how long have you been grieving? In what ways have you been grieving? And not that there's a right way or a wrong way, but when you meet somebody and they just lost somebody, there's a lot of things you expect, right? You expect, okay, I understand if they break down crying. I understand that they don't want to go out and have fun. They maybe want to be seclusive and they etc. So you're going to understand their behaviors. But if it's been 20 years and they're still doing those things, then you can see that sometimes that can be problematic. And I do know a lady that her husband passed away, and she if you sit down to talk to her today or tomorrow, she is going to give you the story and she's going to tell you details as if it just happened. And this person has not changed even his bedroom. He still, the clothes that was still in there is still there. She saved the hair that she found on his hairbrush and put it in an envelope. And so, there's this line of, okay, there's the normal bereavement where, okay, we hurt, we ache, we grieve, and then we continue on with life. And then there's the one that can just kind of stump us, right? And we just get stuck there. And so be careful with that, because, if it's been a while since you lost your loved one and you're still like feeling it like it was yesterday, you might want to seek out some counseling and some therapy for that. As far as the stages of grief, this was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's research, and she was the one who identified the 5 stages of grief that we go through: initial denial, then being angry, possibly angry at our loved ones, or possibly angry at God or the doctors, just anger in general. Then we might go through a phase of bargaining, where we start bargaining. Okay, what if I do this surgery? Then can I get, a couple more years over here? What can I do at this point? Bargaining with God, God, let me live long enough to see my granddaughter, and then, I can go then, or, different kinds of ways that people will bargain. Afterwards, they land in a depression sometimes, and that depression can be very long or can be very short. Now, all of these stages do not guarantee for everyone. We're not guaranteed that we'll go through all these stages, and we're also not guaranteed that we'll go through them in this order. But she found this was the most common order. And then the final stage of the grief and bereavement process is acceptance. And of course, not everybody makes it there, right? Okay, because we could die at any point. We have something terminal, and we're told, you only have 6 months, or you're going to die within the year. I mean, there is no guarantee that you're going to get through all these stages. And so acceptance is a good place to be idealistically, because at that point you're no longer like sad, you're no longer maybe desperate and seeking some kind of bargain, but you're actually okay because you come to terms with, okay, I understand what's happening. I'm okay, I've made my peace with everyone, I've said my goodbyes, okay, I'm ready. And so, she was heavily criticized for studying people who were dying. It was very controversial when she began her research. But thanks to her, we have this basic kind of blueprint for what to expect if and when we hear that one of our loved ones is passing, or even ourselves. As far as the good side of emotions, right? And we start talking about like love and learning how to love. And, I wonder sometimes, because I do ask my students, how many of them do want to enter an eventual relationship that is, maybe a lifetime relationship, or maybe at least a long-term relationship. And I'm hearing more and more sometimes students saying, I'm okay by myself. I'm okay. I'm all right. I'll just hang out alone here and be a happy camper all by myself. That's okay for you if you think that it's going to work, but the problem is that human beings are socially wired. We are wired to be with other people, to share with other people, to prioritize even our kin. And so you're going against your biological wiring in that setting. And when we study happy people tend to be very social. So they tend to have social networks, maybe not a lot of them, but they have their social actual network of people that they rely on, that they interact with, and that they exchange time and energies and experiences with. So expanding your ability to love, first of all, expressing, like learning how to express yourself, right? Okay, so how do you love this person? Do you write poetry? Do you sing? Do you just say it? Or we're going to look at the 5 languages, right? The 5 love languages. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how you express that love. And then before you love somebody else, it is stated that you have to be able to love yourself. And so definitely a prerequisite, right, to a loving relationship. As far as being tolerant, that one I think is important when it comes to the expectations that we have of another person. Sometimes we have this perfection idea, like this is it, this is Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, and they're going to be absolutely 100% perfect, which is never true. We're all broken in a few ways here and there. And so just being ready to understand and that, the person makes mistakes. The person is human. The person has some shortcomings. So yeah, definitely be tolerant. That's a great tip. Hang in there because nothing is perfect. And when you're first starting a relationship or trying to find one, it can take a while, and it can take some hit or misses, right? So where you just kind of, that was a fail, that was a bomb, that didn't work. Okay, so just hang in there, right? Okay, keep trying. And then as far as learning to be alone, that one you might say it contradicts. Well, wait, they're asking for our, expanding our ability to love, but learn to be alone also is saying that nobody wants someone who's clinging to them 100% of the time. We always want somebody that can stand alone and can be independent. And then, we come together and we share these times together. But we don't want somebody that we feel that we have to carry. And so, learning to stand on your own, learning to express yourself and be your own person and, have your own friends and do your own hobbies. Those are good things for a relationship. And sometimes we enter relationships and we let all of that go and we expect the other person to be our 100% entertainment 100% of the time. So yeah, we're going to keep that in mind. Grow up. Okay, grow up sounds really harsh, but it is true. It is important to not have the drama, to not have the anxieties and insecurities that you had as a child or as a teenager, but to try to be more mature about how you address your relationship issues. And then, of course, practice, right? Okay, because we know what they say about practice, right? So practice makes perfect. If you are walking around denying your emotions, Freud would have some words for those. He would say, one, that possibly you are repressing your emotions, and he believed that there is a defense mechanism that we resort to where we will exclude those threatening or painful thoughts out of our awareness. And so he called that repression. Now, remember, these aren't scientifically demonstrated or proven in any way. These are just part of Freud's theory. So I always have to give that kind of precursor there because you don't want to assume that these are guaranteed facts. They are part of Freudian psychoanalytic theory. Another form of defense mechanism that Freud identified was suppression. And so suppression is where you are actually conscious of the emotions, but you control them and maybe even transform them instead of actually expressing them. Another thing that is said if you are having to hold back on expressing your emotions is that you are building an emotional debt, and that this debt can continue to grow and grow until it is heavily overwhelming. And so we don't want to be in that situation where you feel like you cannot express yourself. And so once you're ready to, I love this, ready to stop telling your emotions what they should be, then they will tell you what they really are. And so learning how to express our emotions in a healthy and constructive way is definitely what this chapter is about. So, how to deal with these emotions, right? Okay, we have to first learn how to listen to ourselves and listen to our body. And, if you know that you have a tendency to get angry, watching for your heart rate, keeping yourself calm, breathing deeply so that you don't let yourself get out of control when it comes to anger or fear. Same thing with fear, right? Okay, and then kind of keeping yourself grounded, identifying what feelings you're feeling at the moment. Like, what are you going through at the moment, and why do you think you're going through that? Personalizing them so that you recognize, okay, this is not just something that everyone in this room is having, it's something I'm having, and why am I having it? And then finally owning up to it. So by owning up to it, saying, is this a choice? Do I have a choice here? Instead of, seeing this as a threat where I need to run, can I turn around and face it as a challenge? And, I give that example, especially when it comes to like in school, right? Okay, sometimes when we have a challenging class and it's really, pressing on us and it's causing us to change our behaviors and do things differently and really work really, really hard, we can turn around and run and drop the class and say, forget it. Or we can own up to it and say, okay, this is a challenge and I'm going to accept the challenge. Challenge accepted, right? Okay, so all right. And then finally deciding what you will do with them, right? Okay. And so, all right. As far as universality, we have these are the universal emotions, and every culture displays them differently. As far as expressing your feelings has many benefits. So yes, but you want to keep in mind expressing them constructively. You don't want to be destructive about how you express your feelings, meaning you don't want to express your feelings at the expense of making somebody else feel horrible, right? So we have to be able to express them in a way that is still constructive and helpful to the people around us. So as you learn how to do that, you will start feeling more positive about yourself. You'll start feeling higher self-esteem. You'll start